Dateline, Saturday, 23rd February 2019. The more than 190 million citizens of the Nigerian nation, which have more than 84 million registered voters, trooped to the polls to elect who will be the president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the most populous black nation on earth. After a rude postponement a week before, barely 6 hours to the elections, the expectations were high. A nation of 190 million people held its breath, to be or not to be. Time was early hours of Wednesday, February 27, 2019. The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Mahmood Yakubu, a professor of history who also served as the national returning officer for the presidential election, proclaimed President Muhammadu Buhari as the winner of the February 23, 2019 presidential election in Nigeria.
That Muhammadu Buhari of the All Progressives Congress, having satisfied the requirements of the law and scored the highest number of votes, is hereby declared winner and is returned elected. Thank you.
73 party standard bearers were on the sweepstakes for the sole presidential plume job in Nigeria. With 15,191,947 votes cast in his favor in the election, Buhari is set for his second and final term in office. His closest rival, Alhaji Atiku, a former vice president and the People's Democratic Party PDP candidate in the election, was credited with 11,262,978 votes. A cursory look at the collated results by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, shows that states that recorded high numbers in 2015 have turned out incredibly low numbers, thus making the 2019 presidential election the lowest recorded percentage turnout of voters in the history of Nigeria. This is in stark contrast to 2003, when 70% of all registered voters turned out to vote. In 2015, the national average turnout was approximately 44%, owing to issues such as voter apathy and the heavy activity of Boko Haram in the northeast. States such as Abia, Enugu and Ebonyi witnessed the lowest turnout, with less than 30% of their registered voters marking the ballot. The average in the 2019 election has remained at 34.7%. Despite continued insurgency, states such as Borno and Yobe, which were affected by Boko Haram attacks on the very morning of the presidential and National Assembly elections, surprisingly recorded the highest voter turnout for 2019. Statistically, this is a mathematical improbability. After the declaration by the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, on Tuesday, February 27, that President Muhammadu Buhari has emerged as the winner of the 2019 presidential election, some key statistics on voting patterns began to emerge. Only 34.75% or 28,614,190 of registered voters actually voted in the presidential elections. This is 0.91% less than the total number of accredited voters, to make up a total of 35.66% or 29,364,209 of total registered voters. The number of valid votes were just 33.18% or 27,324,583 of the 82,344,107 registered voters that led to the final decision. President Buhari reportedly polled 55.6% or 15,191,847 votes of total votes cast to win the election, while Atiku polled 41.22% or 11,262,978 votes, emerging as the closest rival to President Buhari. Kano State had the highest number of votes cast, which was 1,964,751 votes, of which 1,891,134 were valid votes. Jigawa had the highest rate of voter turnout, with 55.67% or 1,171,801 of its registered voters showing up for accreditation. About 52.55% of its registered voters had valid votes. This was followed by Katsina State with 48.45% or 1,555,473 votes, and Sokoto State with 46% or 871,891 valid votes. Lagos State led the state with the lowest voter turnout of 17.25%, or 1,089,567 votes, followed by Abia with 18%, or 323,291 votes, and Rivers with 19.97%, or 642,165 valid voters. This is in sharp contrast to the 68.18% turnout recorded in Rivers State in the 2015 elections.
Buhari was declared winner in Niger State with a total of 612,371 votes, representing 68% of the total votes cast, with a margin of 394,265 votes over Atiku, who was credited with 218,052 votes. However, according to testimonies by various local government returning officers and electoral officials during collation of results at the INEC headquarters in Minna, the election was marred by a number of irregularities. These irregularities ranged from manual voting, following the failure of card readers in almost all the local government areas, ballot box snatching, harassment of ad hoc INEC staff, and outright vote buying. One wonders how these voters were accredited when majority of all card readers in the state malfunctioned or never worked, except in Minna, the state capital. In addition, many INEC officials recounted how hoodlums invaded polling units in some local government areas, snatching ballot boxes and papers, only to return them later, and forcing the ad hoc INEC staff to abandon card readers for manual voting. All this allegedly took place in the full glare of the police and other security agencies, who watched helplessly while alleged hoodlums threatened the lives of the INEC officials. All the complaints were recounted by the state returning officer, Professor Freeman Mary, during the collation of the results.
We had reported cases of polling units affected across the state, particularly local governments, and the collation officers at the local government level reported to us those challenges that they had, and we had council PUAs in Niger State where elections could not hold or were cancelled for one reason or the other. The reasons cut across the 25 local government areas. Some of the card readers could not function because of lack of network. The local governments are very, very far apart and are very far from the state headquarters, which is Minna. Some would take about 7 hours before they reach the headquarters, and some are actually in very remote areas where some of the card readers could not function.
More so, the results declared in Niger State by INEC appear at variance with those of independent observers and the PDP collated results. This allegedly unwholesome trend was replicated across several states of the Federation. However, independent observers and the PDP, via various online sources that reported the collated results in real time, made the figures available. Were reported in states such as Kebbi, Cross Rivers, Zamfara, Akwa Ibom, Kaduna, Oyo, and Lagos states, while several other states such as Jigawa, Osun, and Delta states witnessed lesser deductions, but all in favor of the ruling APC.
An election must have a clear outcome. As far as the electoral umpire, INEC, is concerned, the presidential and national assembly elections held in Nigeria on February the 23rd, earlier postponed from February 16, had clear outcomes.
The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has presented the certificate of return to Nigeria's president-elect. Chairman of the Commission, Mahmoud Yakubu, made a presentation at the Collation Center in Abuja on Wednesday.
This position is like sore sauce to the opposition politicians.
As you all know, democracy is a government of the people and by the people. Only when the people's choice prevails.
Elections will be free and fair if the electoral umpire is independent and impartial. Eligible voters are allowed to cast their ballots without intimidation or harassment. All political actors adhere strictly to the electoral code. Voters are given vital information and impartial assistance to cast their ballots. The voting and counting procedure are faultless. Media and accredited observers and party agents are given reasonable access to voting and counting. Complaints are quickly and impartially handled. There are no dissenting voices over election results. Uninhibited opportunity to vote and be voted for in all elections. timely arrival of electoral personnel and materials, secrecy of ballot, no inducement of voters and electoral officials, effective and acceptable design of ballot papers, impartial security protection at polling stations, impartial treatment of candidates by the police, army and other security agencies. Freedom of choice is not impeded. Many have argued, and some say correctly too, that the elections in many parts of the country fell short of some of these global best practices. It is true, the electoral umpire promised a rancor-free and hitch-free polls, but some worrisome features hallmarked the elections. Political thuggery, bloody violence, militarization of opposition strongholds, questionable early money bombing in Borno State, institutional rigging, ballot box snatching by thugs and even uniformed men, vote selling and buying, disagreement over election results, failure of smart card readers in several polling units, late arrival of personnel and electoral materials at many polling stations across the country, resulting in late commencement of accreditation and compounded organizational blunders.
The ANEC officials, they came by almost 11:30, and after we lined up, all we had by the presiding officer here is that they forgot the ballot boxes. That's the ballot box. How will you forget ballot boxes?
People are angry, people are not happy. In fact, we told that some machine that there's no network.
Inadequate electoral materials in some areas, destruction of ballots already cast by hoodlums in opposition strongholds, detestable acts of brigandage. The electoral umpire, the Independent National Electoral Commission, may have admitted all this much when, in its own assessment of the elections, expressed concerns about gross misconduct and excesses on the part of security agencies. Election could not hold in many polling centers due to disruptions and deliberate non-compliance with the use of smart card reader, contrary to the INEC guidelines for the conduct of elections. It expressed deep concerns in the conduct of certain members of the security agencies in some states. The Commission gave an assurance that it will take up the matter with the Inspector General of Police.
They should defend how they went to Emoha to cut away material. They should defend how they went to Electoral local government to cut away material. They killed people in Omewa. They killed a lady in Degema. I don't want to talk about that Abonema issue.
This is everything they burnt. Look at, they came here, they burnt all our ballot papers, they burnt our ballot boxes. They first came this morning, they said they came with thugs.
They're selling the vote on Akota. They're selling the vote in Akota.
All the INEC officials, look at people, disenfranchised voters, all shouting and calling for their rights.
She was just here right now, and this guy came and scattered everything. Oh, this is just not good. This is not supposed to be the election or the democracy we opted for, but that's exactly what we are seeing around here now. The citizens are angry. Everyone is shouting. Everyone is breaking. Like, this is wrong. You needed to see when it started. I ran. I was watching them.
I just destroyed all the ballots that have been casted in this polling unit. It was a PDP area. This is a presidential ballot paper. They destroyed everything.
It is imperative to x-ray the barely veiled partisan role played by the security agencies across the nation. Of major and curious concern is the mayhem unleashed on hapless Nigerians in River State. Places like Abonema was turned into a virtual war zone. It was no less a military invasion.
How be the world one carry no say Abonema dey run? Dey there. How the world one carry no wetin dey happen for here? If you no be there, so that security, adequate security go come Abonema, so that all these things go stop.
It is on record that states such as Lagos, Delta, Rivers, Kaduna, Gombe, Akwa Ibom, Benue, Plateau, Oyo, Ogun, Imo, Abia, Kwara, Bayelsa, Sokoto, amongst others, were target theaters of militarized and rigged elections, as was the case on the 23rd of February. The killings during the presidential election are a source of worry also to the ruling All Progressive Congress APC, even though it is the beneficiary of the violence-mad polls.
There were some elements who is part of the efforts of the security agencies, conducted themselves in a way that led to violence, and unfortunately some of our countrymen and women lost their life in the process.
When All Progressive Congress APC leaders were threatening foreign election monitors with returning to their country on body bags, we didn't know that they had designed the same thing for Nigerians. As at the last count, over 50 Nigerians have lost their lives last Saturday, most of them from the South-South region, where a division of the army were turned onto the people on the election day.
On election day, citizen video flooded social media showing incidents of violence at some polling stations. The Independent Electoral Commission, INEC, has confirmed incidents of ballot box destruction, voter intimidation and the abduction of election officials. A number of polling stations weren't able to open or had polling disrupted by malfunctioning equipment.
The reports of 2 local election observer groups were critical of the conduct of the elections. For instance, the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room.
The elections in 2019 was a retrogressive step in terms of what should have been improvements in it. So it makes us worried and makes us really concerned that the ability of Nigerian citizens to freely make decisions about who rule them has not yet been entrenched.
On the issue of electoral violence in particular, the CDD Analysis Center notes with dismay the violence that marred the polls in several areas in Lagos, Ebonyi, Imo, Rivers, Osun, Oyo, Delta, Kogi and Akwa Ibom states. The report states that ballot box snatching and voting disruption severely dampened morale in the affected states. Violence has sadly been part of the tradition of elections in Nigeria, but the bloody violence witnessed on February 23rd Presidential and National Assembly election is worrisome. Challenges include compromised INEC officials as well as partisan security operatives. In several parts of the country, scores of political thugs armed with lethal weapons, notably guns and machetes, roam the streets and polling centers without any inhibition. Sporadic gunshots rend the air as a simple civil exercise like voting turned polling stations into war zones. The number of fatalities remain uncertain. The Center for Democracy and Development surmised over 20 people, but the leading opposition PDP put the figure at 50. Other sources confirmed that 40 people were killed. A disturbing trend about the new wave of electoral violence, ballot box snatching and destruction of already cast ballots is that it leads to cancellation, inconclusive elections, and outright disenfranchisement of voters. On election day, bombs were detonated in Zamfara, Borno, and Yobe states. Even Al Jazeera Network reported that residents fled areas in Yobe State on the morning of the elections when Boko Haram terrorists infiltrated the city of Gaidam.
Hundreds of residents and potential voters fled the town of Gaidam after suspected Boko Haram fighters attempted to infiltrate the city.
Within the Damaturu there is no problem, but outside Damaturu there is problem, especially Gaidam local government. There is no election there.
One then wonders where INEC excavated hundreds of thousands of votes credited to the APC from. Maybe these voters voted while on the run, or maybe in mobile polling units. Independent sources, particularly via the Twitter handle of Ahmed Sakida, a prolific major local news reporter on Boko Haram based in Maiduguri, Borno State, reported rocket attacks on election day that targeted Maiduguri airport with 5 missiles. On the claims by the security agencies that the heavy explosions were mere drills, Maiduguri residents disagree. According to Ahmed Sakida's Twitter handle, why would the military stage unannounced gunfire, multiple explosions in sequence in a very tense environment few hours to voting time? On that same day, ISIS announced that it has targeted Nigerian military installations with Russian-made BM-21 Grad multiple launcher rockets.
In Dikwa, the number of the score of APC is by far more than the total votes. There are incidences of fake ballot papers, you know. There are incidences of not using the card reader at all, you know. In most places, card reader was not even used.
A most contentious issue was that of card readers. Card readers were reportedly discarded in Borno, Yobe, Katsina, Zamfara, Kebbi, Sokoto, Gombe, and Bauchi states. The INEC guidelines prescribe total cancellation in cases where card readers are not used. The card reader is the only validation required by the INEC rules. The unearthly and curious arithmetic of votes from Borno and Yobe states took on stratospheric proportions. While the national turnout averaged a paltry 35%, where peaceful, densely populated metropolis in the south, such as Lagos and Abia, were as low as 17%. War zones in the north, such as Borno State, where even global news outlets confirmed late arrival of election materials or personnel, averaged 87% turnout.
Especially in the northeast of the country, we heard reports of attacks in 3 different towns in the area where Boko Haram is very active. Remember, the terror group has threatened to target these elections, and residents in Maiduguri, the provincial capital there, reported several explosions this morning.
The Chairman, Information and Voter Education Committee of INEC, Mr. Festus Okoye, gave a breakdown of the regulations and guidelines as follows: that the voting procedure for the conduct of all elections covered by the rules and guidelines remains the continuous accreditation and voting system as provided in Section 8A of the guidelines. The mandatory use of the smart card reader, consistent with the provision of Section 60 of the Electoral Act 2010 as amended. However, there were reported and verifiable cases of the absence of card readers in Borno, Yobe, Gombe, Sokoto, Katsina, Zamfara, Kebbi, and Bauchi states. Card readers either malfunctioned, failed to function, or were outrightly rejected by voters in these states. These were in total disregard for or in total contravention of the relevant provisions of the electoral guidelines. The Electoral Act, as well as the INEC guidelines, prescribe that voting shall be in accordance with the continuous accreditation and voting system procedures as specified in these regulations and guidelines, the election manual, and other guides issued by the Commission. In accordance with Section 49(2) of the Electoral Act, a person intending to vote shall be verified to be the same person on the register of voters by the use of the smart card reader in the manner prescribed in these regulations and guidelines. Section 13 subsection A states that in the event of sustained malfunction of the smart card reader, the presiding officer shall immediately inform the supervisory presiding officer, the electoral officer, and the Electoral Operations Support Center for replacement. He shall suspend accreditation and voting until a new card reader is made available. And in Section 13 subsection B, where a replacement smart card reader is not available by 2 p.m., the presiding officer or the APO, as the case may be, shall inform the supervisory presiding officer, the electoral officer, and the Electoral Operations Support Center of the situation. He shall file a report of the incident and inform the voters and polling agents that accreditation and voting for the affected polling unit shall continue the following day. All these provisions were ignored by INEC. The direct implication is that it totally invalidates results from states such as Borno, Yobe, Gombe, Sokoto, Katsina, Zamfara, Kebbi, and Bauchi states. Mr. Festus Okoye had insisted on national television just 3 days to the rescheduled elections that 190,000 card readers were fully and properly reconfigured with close to zero failure rates.
We have 190,000 smart card readers. All the smart card readers that were programmed for the 16 February elections have all been returned to the state offices of the Independent National Electoral Commission. And we are confident that by tomorrow, being Wednesday, we are going to complete the reconfiguration of all the smart card readers.
I want to report that as at last night, we have achieved 95% configuration of the 180,000 smart card readers, and this process is going to be completed early morning on Wednesday, clear 1 day ahead of schedule.
This obviously was a grievous misinformation, and the nation is paying a grievous price.
It appears that a worrisome pattern has begun to emerge as regards the non-adherence by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to its own election rules and guidelines. In the 2015 elections, only 17.5% full biometric accreditation was carried out in Kano State. Only 288,644 persons were accredited properly, while a whopping 1,358,537 voted without accreditation via the smart card reader. In Katsina State, only 398,843 persons were properly accredited, while 1,045,994 voted without smart card reader accreditation. This trend was replicated in other northern states such as Nasarawa, Sokoto, Yobe, and Zamfara, amongst others. However, the reverse was the case in most southern states. The issue of the non-use of smart card readers in several parts of northern Nigeria is becoming an INEC template. This worrisome trend is nothing but a vagrant assault on Nigeria's fledgling democracy and a gross criminal breach of the Electoral Act. The use of the smart card reader for biometric accreditation is sacrosanct. The non-utilization of the card reader for accreditation of eligible voters invalidates the voting process. INEC rules and guidelines for the 2019 election was duly signed by the INEC chairman on the 12th of January 2019. It is therefore incumbent on all involved in the election process to play by the rules. Section 47 of the INEC Rules and Guidelines is unambiguous in its provisions and prescriptions. Section 47B states, where there is willful obstruction or resistance to deployment and distribution of election materials, enter 0 votes for the affected polling units and proceed. Where there is voter resistance to the use of the smart card reader, enter 0 votes for the affected polling units and proceed. and where the use of the smart card reader is discontinued midway into the elections due to sustained malfunction and no replacement is available before 2 p.m., a date for supplementary election shall be announced. It is therefore imperative to reassert that the sanctity of the electoral process is key and cardinal to the survival of any democracy. How can INEC, the umpire of the electoral process, announce a winner and then 2 days later goes ahead to announce the conduct of a supplementary elections to conclude the process? It is a clear case of reverse osmosis. Many may consider the planned conduct of a supplementary election by INEC in some parts of the country where elections didn't hold as part of a larger game plan to legalize and legitimize allegedly doctored results in the event of a judicial decision at the tribunal. There is, however, the need to ask some very pertinent questions. Whose purpose will the supplementary election serve when a winner has been announced and a certificate of return has been duly issued to the purported winner? Why conduct a supplementary presidential election when INEC, against public outcry, had adjudged the elections to be free, fair, and credible?
When voters are disenfranchised as a result of electoral malpractices, their civil rights are violated just as surely if they are prevented from voting. Besides, the integrity of ballot boxes is just as important to the credibility of elections as access to it. Some deductions could be made from the level of bloodletting during the elections, erosion of electoral code. Some politicians pose a greater danger to democracy. It is instructive and quite curious that violence erupts in the stronghold of the opposition, ostensibly to weaken their electoral fortunes. While elections went on smoothly, with minimal hitches in some states where the powers that be had foothold, millions of voters in the areas under the grip and control of opposition were technically disenfranchised through electoral violence and malpractices. This raises a critical question. Does it mean that those who died on Saturday, February 23rd, due to no fault of theirs, have died as unsung heroes and died for nothing? The electoral umpire should heed the advice of the umbrella body of top journalists in the country, the Nigeria Guild of Editors, that acts of violence that characterized the February 23rd presidential and national assembly elections in many parts of Nigeria, which led to loss of lives and burning of electoral materials, should become history.
I want to know which way Nigeria is heading to. Many years after independence, we still find it hard to start.